Hello, Cottage Grove. Welcome, one and all, to History Pub, sponsored by the Cottage Grove Genealogical Society and the downtown Cottage Grove, happening every Tuesday, second Tuesday of the month, at least until January. We're still hoping someone will step up and take on the hosting duties. We're in the heart of the historical district, the National Registered Historical District, in the Burkholder Woods building. And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but when this served as a dry goods store, it's very probable that crayons that were used for Opal's diary were purchased here.
Yes, in fact, it's very likely that crayons in Opal's diary were purchased here because this was a dry goods store, and when they were remodeling it to make the accent Fiddle, they found a couple of receipts from a man named George Miller. Now, if you're a big Opal fan, you know that George Miller is the man who wears gray neckties and is kind to mice. So he, like most people in town, shopped here for all kinds of dry goods. But in this case, we got the man who bought Opal's crayons as a customer here.
All right, we want to thank Bart and the staff here at the Axe and Fiddle for hosting and providing some of the prizes that you'll be eligible tonight in trivia. My cat actually, and this is on the gospel, my cat dislodged. I placed the Deborah Mons have prepared a beautiful trivia sheet and pencils and provided an additional prize. This is in front of the Christian Church, the Church of Christ, and Opal and Elbert Bayday, the editor of the Sentinel, are pictured in this assemblage of, I believe, Christian Endeavor. And we have also a special, I believe this is the last one extant, Opal shirt provided by Alice Christensen. So these are two additional prizes that will be in the running tonight. So if you didn't get a little cutout piece of paper and some funky marker or pencil, just wave your hand and Amy will provide some material for your trivia. We also want to thank Jim Lockhart, who is faithfully recording the history pubs. And not only does he record them, but he edits them and puts in the slideshows so you can actually see what's on the screen clear up and read source documents and everything from that. So beautiful job, and they get posted on the Cottage Grove's Genealogical Society's webpage on Facebook. Maybe on the webpage too, I believe. We also want to recognize the Partners of History, the group that works so tirelessly, collaborates on local history. That is composed of the Cottage Grove Historical Museum, the Cottage Grove Genealogical Society, the Oregon Aviation Historical Society, the Cottage Grove Historical Society, the Cottage Grove City Library, Bohemia Mining Museum, and the Singing Creek Institute. And I'm pleased to see representatives from many of those organizations joining us tonight. If you're interested to learn more about Cottage Grove history, there are many opportunities to volunteer with any of these organizations. So I see Holly Turpin from Cottage Grove Historical Society. I can represent the museum. Where is? Genealogical. Yeah, so anyway, so if there's a member of the library staff are here, and so anyway, if you want to get involved, catch some of these folks tonight, and they can put you to work. All right, we're honored to have a speaker with us tonight that almost needs no introduction. Resident local expert on Opal Whiteley. He was born in the Lick Skillet area, the borders of Louisiana and Texas. He would disappear for hours on end in the woods. His grandmother inspired him to love history. In 1976, he moved from New Orleans to Cottage Grove. He's a railroader by trade and was going to build to spur up the Cerro Gordo planned intentional community. Steve is recognized one of the leading authorities on the Oregon writer Opal Whiteley. In 1994, Steve founded the Opal Whiteley Memorial in Cottage Grove to bring attention to mental health needs in our community. Opal Whiteley was a best-selling nature author. In 1921, that she published her diary. She grew up in and around Cottage Grove. She was always on the move, her father following timber jobs upriver and in town. The University of Oregon has asked him to assist in publishing Oregon's best-selling diary online. He has many, many dozens of historical photographs of the people and places Opal wrote about. In addition to being a historian for over the past 20 years, he's on the board of the Oregon Asian Celebration, where in 2023 he was named the Man on the Moon and appeared on the poster. He serves on boards of the Historical Society and Singing Creek Educational Center. He likes to say he sleeps in Eugene but lives in Cottage Grove. So please welcome Steve Williams.
So thank you all so very, very much for coming down tonight. I just love doing these talks with the History Pub because I see so many people who already know something about history and are really invested in it. And I just really appreciate y'all coming out tonight for my talk. And this one, because it's Opal's birthday, or December 11th, I think she picked February 11th for her real birthday, but December 11th is her most recognized birthday, so we're pretty close. And the title of this talk is The Guardian Angels of Colton, Washington. And it was Opal Whiteley's home from December 1897 to August 1903, assuming that the child that was in Colton, Washington was our Opal Whiteley. Keep in mind, our Opal Whiteley claims that she never lived in Colton, but was given to the Whiteleys at some point, either before the trip or during the trip. And I'll show you how that is not a ridiculous idea, that there could be some validation in there. But now, while her family always maintained she was born in Colton, Washington, Opal Whiteley says that she was born in the Vatican. The Vatican, the big place in Rome where the Pope lives. And so we're going to explore, can both of these stories be partly true? I'm going to show that in Opal's story, you don't count anything off the table, anything. And she always maintained that she was kidnapped by these men wearing dark coats. I might have a picture of those men. Oh, now if Opal was born in Colton, Washington, it doesn't make things clearer about her mystery and things about her. It kind of muddies the waters for both fans and people who don't like her. I love it. It's like in this talk, I'm going to talk about how Opal could believe she was born in the Vatican, why she believed in European conspiracies, who her angel mother might really have been, and where her English as a second language writing comes from. Is it inherited from French or German? A curious thing about Opal is that she wrote she was right-handed, but she wrote with a very distinctive left-handed slant. And We're going to answer tonight, hopefully, where she learned Catholic chants and songs that are in her diary that her family says that she was never exposed to, and why that idea, that she was never exposed to them. And all through this, don't forget, we're dealing with a person who has a photographic memory. That is well documented by every biographer and every friend of hers. She could rattle off the names, scientific names of thousands of natural history items, of rocks and feathers and leaves. She was that kind of genius, and I personally think that she had Asperger's or autism. Not schizophrenia, as some biographies say, and what she was institutionalized for. Much more likely she had Asperger's and autism. So, this talk is also going to go into how Opal could believe she was a replacement child for another Opal who had died. So that story runs through her thing. And we know that Opal Whiteley's mother really feared typhoid fever. A lot of smart mothers did, but typhoid fever was a terrible problem in the logging camps and sanitation. Why did she, when she was 3 years old, tell Ed Whiteley that he wasn't her father anymore? Gonna answer that too. Why Lizzie told friends that Opal was not her child. That one, I mean, my mother said my brother and I were not her children. So it's like this sometimes, and if you got a kid with autism, you say that too, it's gonna sink in and stay. So their belief that she's a replacement child or adopted might be just there from Mrs. Whiteley herself. And the Bourbon Orleans family that Opal claimed to be part of has close connections to the Pacific Northwest, where Opal's family was in Colton. And interestingly enough, Opal claims that she was kidnapped from France in 1902 by men wearing dark coats. I'm going to show you pictures of a French abbot who was exiled from France in the right year. And what was the exile for? Because the government of France had done a big thing where it was very important to them that secular government outranked the Catholic Church. And they'd been going for centuries in this ongoing struggle. But it was around this time that the government of France wanted everybody within the churches to first swear an allegiance to the civil government of France, not Rome. And a lot of Catholics who were in France left because of that, but this French abbot was exiled. Now, a lot of this talk builds on things that I learned we pulled together from this man here, who was a true genius and mentor to me, Curtis Irish. This is Laurel Grove Cemetery where I met him, and the graves of Opal Whiteley's grandparents. Laurel Grove Cemetery makes a nice place to go visit, and Opal's mother's buried there, her grandparents, and an aunt and uncle. And another shot of him. We did a road trip 5 days long, almost 1,000 miles, or over 1,000 miles, from Eugene to Fossil, Oregon, up to Pendleton, and then to Colton, Washington. It was one of the best road trips of my life, and we gathered up so much history. We had a blast. Along the way, I dug up, just searching in Wikipedia, how many place names in Oregon have French origins. There's at least 30 places like the Dalles, that's a type of rapids. Out here west of town, we've got Lorain, Moller County, Marion County, just Corvallis, Philomath, names that we just take for granted, but they have origins in the French trappers who were here before the English. Now, there was a 2001 book by a woman in England who knew Opal Whiteley, Elizabeth Lawrence, and she maintained, and she doesn't say how she knows it, so it's not documented, but she maintains that the Orleans family stashed a child in the Northwest before Opal. Now, I'm going to show that that's not a crazy idea at all. Now, why would you send an aristocratic kid to the Northwest? First of all, there is a code among aristocrats that you do not acknowledge an illegitimate child. Everything in aristocracy, in monarchy, is built on top of legitimate marriage. You started opening it up to illegitimate kids, everything, the whole royal structure goes awry. And so if Opal was an illegitimate child of Prince Henri d'Orleans, it wouldn't be beyond the idea that she would be stashed in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon. Couldn't send them to Europe or Asia because there was conflict there. Minor royalty were getting assassinated in Europe, and eventually led to World War I with the assassination of that duke from Serbia. The Pacific Northwest, remember, was considered the new Eden. It was a land unscarred by the Civil War of the South and even the North. It was a land of fairly peaceful Indians, and it was rich agriculture. It's a great place to send a kid that you hope would have a decent life. And the orphan trains, used to be orphan trains that brought thousands of kids from the cities out to the west, and families with the train would stop in all these places, and all the kids would get out and they would line up, and families would go there and they would look for a kid that would fit into the family, had somewhat similar complexion or eyes or age, something, but look for a kid that would fit in the family. And that's why Opal says that she was put in with the Whiteleys, because she looked something like that, something like them. Now this is Colton, Washington at around 1900. This is the likely birthplace of Opal Whiteley, but I will show others are possible. And this road is still there. Right up here, this church steeple is the Catholic church that's still there. But what's really interesting is this building right over here. Now, Mr. Irish and I drove into Colton. It doesn't look much different now. And we went around. Well, first thing we did, we pulled into town. There was this really tiny, tiny park. And there were these mothers there dipping out ice cream. And they were from the 4-H and Future Farmers of America. So I took that as a sign, because I was in 4-H when I was a kid at Lickskillet. So I said, okay, stop here, Mr. Irish. I'm going to ask these women if they know anything about what we're looking for. We were looking for the farm that Opal Whiteley was supposed to have been born on, run by Doug Mustard. And so this woman is just dipping out ice cream to the kids and looks up and says, oh yes, I know where that is. I pasture my cows there. I'll draw you a map as soon as I finish serving the ice cream. So we've been in Colton for like all of a minute, 2 minutes, and I had a map to the place where Opal Whiteley was born. And I've got pictures that pretty much well, I know it was the Mustard farm where the Whiteleys lived. But it was, you go up this road, Steptoe Road, you make this big, long curve to where you're looking back at the town here. Now this is Elizabeth and Ed Whiteley's wedding photographs, July 1996. They were married in Walla Walla, Washington, which is just a little ways from Colton. Oh, I didn't describe where Colton is. It's way in the southeast corner of Washington State. You know where Pullman, Washington is, where Washington State University is? It's about 15 miles southeast of Pullman. Now here are possible photos, I think they are, but I'll call them possible photos of Opal as a baby. And but here's the no child named Opal Whiteley has ever been born in Whitman County, Washington, as far as I can see. Now, back when she was born, they didn't keep good records. So there's no record of her birth. There's a family story that a nurse helped Elizabeth Whiteley, which begs the question where the nurse came from in this really tiny town. But I think I know. Now, interesting enough, Opal's belief that she is a replacement child and that Opal is not her real name, it comes from her parents, and her mother named her first, named her Margaret, which was the name of a child that her husband, Ed Whiteley, his sister, had a baby. That child was named Margaret, and she died. So Lizzie Whiteley named her child Margaret after the girl that had died. And then Lizzie and that woman, Ed Whiteley's sister, they had a blow up and a fallout. And she changed the name to Opal, from Margaret to Opal. But that's where this kind of who am I gets set up. Because I don't know how long she was called Margaret. And remember, this kid has a photographic mind. So she said February 6, 1897 is her real birth date. I don't know how she picked that, never have been able to find out. That would make her 10 months older though. Now this is the house that she was probably born in. And right here is Doug Mustard. They had a dog named Ginger. There's a dog, little boy there, and Doug Mustard's wife. Now something real curious, there was a bad typhoid fever epidemic in Colton when Opal was about 2 years old, 2.5 years old. And Mrs. Whiteley was pregnant with her second child, Pearl. And Doug Mustard's niece told me that he had typhoid fever. Now, I conject from there that Opal was exposed to typhoid fever. If that's the case, if Opal was exposed to typhoid fever, and I'll show how it's very likely here, then they would have had to have separated the mother and daughter. They would have had to have separated Mrs. Whiteley and Opal, because the risk to typhoid fever was extremely deadly to children in the womb, young children. It was especially deadly to them. Now these are pictures from Doug Mustard's farm, and note these wheat hills in the background. They're not as far away as they look because of the perspective of the camera, but just note those wheat fields there. And this picture I love. I think this is Opal with sheep, and you see the same hills. It is the Mustard farm because the hills are there. And I think it's just a lovely photograph of Opal or some child petting sheep. Whoops. And I would give anything to know exactly who this woman here is. Could be Ed Whiteley's mother, could be Ed Whiteley's sister. Cottage Grove newspaperman Albert Bede, he had, in addition to the book he wrote, at the U of O, he has a file of these private unpublished notes. One of them does mention that this man, a pioneer of Colton, Washington, named L.F. Gibbs, says that the foster parentage claim is just discredited by people who knew the Whiteleys there in Colton. And it's also, he says that it's not true that she received an education in a Catholic convent. And Albert Bede gets confused because it's the first time he's heard this come up. And there are reasons for that. So is this our Opal here in Colton, Washington? Oh, I want to know. So this is her about 3 or 4, about the time they moved to Wendling. Wendling was a large logging camp outside of Marcola, northeast of Eugene today. And at its peak, it had 800 people, and it was the first fully electrified city in the state of Oregon, this logging company. And here's an interesting 1918 letter from her great-grandmother in Colton, Maria Louisa Whiteley. Maria Louisa is a very German-sounding name. But what's interesting, I took this letter to a convent up in the area, and I asked a nun about it. And if you read the letter straight up, it reads like the woman is uneducated. She pointed out that it was written in German syntax. And this is the way, phonetically, a person who spoke German and English was a second language to would write and spell things. So things like scholar for student, district with a D-E-S-T-R-I-K. Pictures of Opal and Pearl about 1903. These are the first ones we have that are definitively our Opal. And as through this, and there's a curious thing because she writes about being 3 years old in the fairyland around us. And one, I just put two of them up here. And this one is written that when she was 3, she had her daily lunch counter for birds to come onto the windowsill and get food. And then she went out in the snow to go play with the chickadees. And here, again, she's talking about when she was 3, but look at the way she writes it. She's about, 13, 14 when she writes this, maybe a little older. But she's talking about something that happens when she was 3 years old, but look at the way she expresses it. She has this pet chipmunk who comes in and starts eating this nut salad that's on the table for a guest. Mama gets really mad. And she said that Pandora took big samples too, just like I wanted to long time ago, before that birthday that made me 4 years old. Listen, before that birthday that made me 4 years old. Have you ever heard anybody express like before that birthday that made me 21 or something? No, this is a child with autism. Now here is a really cool picture. This is Ed Whiteley. No, this is not Ed Whiteley. This is his brother, Opal Whiteley. I think possibly their mother. He died young, age 25. He's buried there in Colton. But look, see this giant tree and limb. That is this tree right there, and that limb is still hanging out there, still a big giant tree. And that's on the back of Doug Mustard's farm. Now, Opal heard some French, I'm convinced, and also German, or native French and German speakers who were speaking English but with thick accents from France and Germany. But look at their direct neighbors. These people are the neighbors of the Whiteleys, and they build a school. I can't even pronounce it, but they're Bourbonnais. It's something of Bourbon, which is curious, and they were from French Quebec, Canada. This picture is 1902, when Opal would have still been there, and it's a school just down the road from the Whiteleys, and this French family, I think, were their closest neighbors. There were a lot of French, Germans, Italians in this tiny, tiny little town of 300 people. And Ellery Sedgwick, publisher of the Atlantic Monthly, who published Opal's diary, believed that Opal heard about a royal visitor, a prince, who came from France to see somebody who'd fought with his father in one of those many wars that the Europeans have. And it's just real curious. He thinks that Opal got her idea that she was from royalty from stories she remembered. He knew what a memory she had of this royal visitor in Oregon. But other than this, I've never found any documentation for it. There may be documentation, but in a small newspaper that may not be online or wasn't online when I referenced it. Okay, and just to show this, this is Prince Henri d'Orleans, Opal's alleged father. Curious thing is, I think he really would have liked Opal a lot. And she also had an uncle named Henry, and who nicknamed her Little Oriole, Little Oriole, Little Oriole. Now if you take that little Oriole, and guess what? Little Oriole, that's an ear rhyme for Little Orleans, the correct pronunciation of Orleans. Probably just an accident of history, but it's just kind of curious. And he traveled all over the Western Hemisphere, South America, Mexico, California. This man was a walking genius, spoke multiple languages, taught her nature, poetry, geology, spirituality. I think he was really the model for Angel Father. This is a picture of him here in Fossil, Oregon. This is a picture of him in Cottage Grove. He was one of the most important early miners in Bohemia, and he and Dr. Oglesby, who was a legend in the town early on, had the Annie gold mine, which was the first mine to show that gold in large paying quantities was up in Bohemia. He made a fortune off of that. Now I would give a lot to know who these people are. I found these in a family album that was owned by Opal's second cousin. They are pictures from the Scott family, and who they are. What's really curious is look how dark skinned they are. And look at this woman, she just looks hauntingly like Opal to me. And I'm thinking, who is she? And this fellow, you know, you can tell, I didn't put the slide up, but if you want to know about what kind of work somebody does in an old picture, scan their hands and blow them up. This man is not a worker. This man's nails look just fine. This man, on the other hand, his nails show that dirt underneath the cuticles, and just that he works hard. So they're in the same photograph, and look at the dark skin of this woman, and look at Opal. That is not Opal, but if you want me to believe it was her mother, I would go for that, because she looks just hauntingly like her. And this is a web page of the Bourbon family. There are a number of offshoots of the Bourbon family, but a few years ago, this is one of the main ones, and they had a family web page, and they put her on there as an alleged daughter. They accepted her as a daughter of Prince Henri. One of them, the current would-be prince, said that she looks like their aunt, that Opal looked like their aunt. So the page isn't up anymore. Now here is a really fascinating piece of evidence that Opal had delirium as a child. Now there are lots of ways to get delirium, but one of the chief ways is to have a high fever. And one of the chief ways at that time to have a high fever is if you had typhoid fever. And I think she probably did, but she had some kind of, if she had delirium, she had a fever. So if she had a fever, again, they would have separated Mrs. Whiteley and Pearl. Just that's what they would have done to protect the unborn baby or the newborn. And this is a woman from Cottage Grove, Nellie Hemingway, that's the Hemingways we know today, was engaged by the Atlantic Monthly to look up some information. She talked to Opal's younger sister, Pearl, and said that she was very sick when she was a child and had delirium. And that's where the family felt that her ideas about being adopted and a French princess must have come from. That I think is just a fascinating thing, because if you had delirium as a small child and were cared for by somebody else in that critical birth to 3 period, that right there sets up a lot of identity questions for later. Anybody familiar with the birth to 3, where you just if you're not with your parents? So this is a closer up there, and We're going to be talking about this building right there. There was a population of 300 souls. This Catholic church is still standing. Curtis Irish and I visited it. And the Whiteley farm with the mustards was around this curve here. But look what Opal passed every time she came and went to town. St. Scholastica's Academy. And Opal becomes just enamored of guardian angels. Guess what? They had a guardian angel preschool with statues of guardian angels. This is a pretty large convent, and it is all filled with aristocratic nuns, mostly from Switzerland, but also Italy, Germany, France. But they were fairly highborn, and they were sent here to find a new mother house because they feared the Swiss government was going to close their mother house in Switzerland. And so they wanted a backup. So this group of nuns was sent here, and they looked all through Oregon, all through Washington, and somehow settled on in Colton, Washington. There's a wonderful book written by one of the nuns who was a historian for him, called Along the Way, The Journey of the Idaho Benedictine Sisters. Fascinating history for looking at at where Opal was, if she was born in Colton, Washington, like her family says. And another book that really had some key information was this book, The Pioneer Catholic History of Oregon. We've mostly forgotten the French Catholic pioneers that were here in Oregon and tended to remind. The Capitol has a statue of Jason Lee, and I don't think anybody here could name an important French Catholic man in Oregon history. But the state capitol's got Jason Lee, the Methodist circuit rider, there. But this is Pioneer Catholic History of Oregon, and he digs up some interesting history that the Orleans family, starting in 1847. Donated money to this diocese that later on Opal Whiteley comes out of. And the French king met with this Archbishop Blanchet 3 times. He was also the king from Spain and I think Belgium, who were all members of the Orleans family, gave money to the Northwest Catholics. And this is documented in this book right here that is just a great history book. But this is right, Opal Whiteley saw this every time she went to and from her house. St. Scholastica's, what a great name for a place that would later turn out Opal Whiteley, who was a terrific scholar on things that she was interested in. And here's some in 1894, the class at the convent and the academy. A lot of these kids are from Europe. And when I was in their little museum, I just felt, sometimes if you do historical research, those of you who do historical research or genealogical research there, you get pulled on things sometime. There is just something that grabs you and says, you have to study here. You have to look for this. And we had a couple of interesting experiences there. I saw her picture very large. I just knew I was looking at the best candidate for Angel Mother that there is. Mother Joanna, a very young Mother Superior at this convent. And she was Swiss, didn't want to come here. She wanted to stay in Switzerland. But she was known for her singing, her poetry, her gardening, all these things that Opal's Angel Mother are supposed to have done with her. Now, I can easily see a Catholic dressed in her nun's garb right there, looking like a child's version of an angel, or being told that's an angel. And well, let me one more thing about this. When it was getting late in the day, and we were in the graveyard, and the graveyard was a little ways from the museum, and they were trying to close everything, and I'm running around the graveyard like, you ever see the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and the guy's running around the graveyard with that fantastic music going, and it starts spinning, spinning, spinning like that. He stops at this grave. It felt just like that. I mean, there were these people from the convent yelling at me from about 30 yards, 40 yards away to, come on, we're closed, come on. I just zoom, 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 zoom. I just had to. They would have had to drag me out of there. And then I found what I was looking for without knowing I was looking for it. A grave of Abbot Marchand, exiled in France in 1902, and their book goes into this, exiled in 1902 for loyalty to the church and the royal family. Now this happens to be the same year Opal's kidnapped. And first they come into, in 1904, they settle into Jordan, Oregon, up that's not too far, 60, 70 miles up the road, with Our Lady of Lourdes Church. And he had a bunch of these French monks trying to make a living at lumbering and logging. It didn't really work. So they all went to, the monks went to different monasteries, and he went to Colton, Washington, to St. Scholastica's with the nuns. And this, I think, is real. If her story that she was kidnapped by men wearing dark coats has any remote thing of being true, all of these Trappist monks who would have been wearing dark coats would have been coming here, speaking the different language, and these are the monks, the Trappist monks that were exiled from France, and I just wonder, are these Opal's kidnappers? Not, you know what I mean? Not real good, but a lot of times when people would send a kid to go to another country, an illegitimate kid especially, and I've looked this up because we just don't have a system quite like this. But at the time, if they were Catholic, they sent them with Catholic nuns or monks or priests, and they would try to get them with, as they call it, a good Catholic family. Now this is really interesting. This exiled abbot, he's on his deathbed, and he wants the nuns to write to his baron friend in France. Now they don't have barons in France. They have, is that Maddie McGraw just walking in? Hello, she is the director for the Springfield Historical Museum on Main Street, and is a really good person to have in there. Thank you for coming, Maddie.
Pretend I'm not late.
But Abbot Marchand, he asked them to write to his baron friend. Now, what the baron is in German a form of nobility. So there's somebody in France of nobility that he wants them to tell him he's dead. So there's a reason for it. He was exiled partly for swearing allegiance to the church and the royal family and not the civil government. So it just is one of those circumstantial things that keeps that story of Opal, keeps giving it wheels, because it's a really, why write to the baron in France? Oops, these pictures. Oh, and I threw this in just to show you the culture shock that the Whiteleys would have gone through. They came from a town, Colton, Washington, where 300 people, 30 of them were nuns. So one in every 10 people is a nun. And they moved just outside of Pyongyang, where they blow up the school 3 times and set it on fire twice. that would be a culture shock. And you know, the stories that Opal was sent with books from Angel Mother and Angel Father, maybe they're true. Maybe she was given those books by nuns because they knew something of the area she was going to. Because folks, this was in the news. This school bombing that happened out in Mohawk was big news all over the place. That doesn't happen frequently, that people blow up a building, a school building, 3 times. And if you go to my website, asianoregon.org, or Stories by Steve, you can read the whole story, 30 pages with 70 footnotes. And this is a picture of Opal's grave, and where she has, that's in both her names. And this is cute. People come by and they leave little offerings, little gifts for her. And you know, I have to think that she is some kind of princess. She's the only college dropout with her statue at the entrance of 2 libraries. It's at the entrance of the Knight Library nowadays, and Cottage Grove down here. So that is it. And her mural up there gracing Main Street, thanks to Alice Christensen here, who got that mural through the Chamber of Commerce. And I've often said I wouldn't have had the balls to even try. You know, they go to the Chamber of Commerce at that time with a proposal that you make Opal Whiteley some kind of, you know, the first mural that the Chamber's going to do, and you put up the town outcast. That's good, Alice. Way to go. And finally, I just want to say thanks to everyone. I'm going to see if I actually made it on time. Pretty close. I don't do any talks on time. This is a long list of people who have helped over the years, and more in there. The Book Mine, Calapooya Books, Axe and Fiddle has played its role. Of course, people in the room here, like Alice, the Cottage Grove Historical Society, the Genealogical Society, which, by the way, if you want to look up where your ancestors lived, like go to the Historical Society, they have a lot of information about the houses and historical areas around here. Or if you want to look up where you came from, go to the Genealogical Society. Highly recommend. They got great researchers at the Cottage Grove Genealogical Society, and they found out things about my family that were totally buried, totally, and I still blown away by that. A lot of those photographs came from Opal's cousin, Jimmy Mathers, who was the first one of the Whiteleys or Scotts that I made a good impression on and just kind of made a connection with. And she opened up their family photograph album to me, and I scanned just about everything in it. Bruce Stewart used to own the gravel parking lot that's Opal Whiteley. Bud and Gary Brandt, who they used to own the building, they're passed away now, but they used to have the auto store there in the building where the mural is. And a story most people don't know is that the Chamber of Commerce didn't ask permission to put that mural up. They just started painting it. And no asking of the permission of the Brandts, who owned the building and who had the right to say, does it go up there or not? And now Bud Brandt, as our former mayor there probably well remembers, was a pretty crusty conservative fellow. Is that an accurate description? But you go in there, and my wife Karen there, when she worked for the radio station here, KNND, she used to go in there and sell advertising. So I would go in there and talk to him sometimes too. And he had one of these auto shops that was just, the walls were almost papered with calendars with sexy models on them. You know how, the sexy model kind of calendar that they used to have at all the auto stores. I don't think they have them anymore, but he had them all through there. Now Bud Brandt had passed, and I went and talked to Gary, who I didn't know as well, and I just was talking to him. I said, your dad, he really liked pictures of pretty women. Yeah, Dad did like pictures of pretty women. I think your dad would think Opal Whiteley was pretty. Yeah, Dad would probably think she was pretty. Yeah, it can stay. And that was how we got the mural. Or they allowed the mural to stay there. And, I'm just so grateful to Alice Christensen and so many people, Connie Houston who painted it, Mr. Tharp who did the school, and it's just been a great addition to the community of Cottage Grove. Oh, and one man, none of this would have started without John Wilson. The first Opal Whiteley birthday I did was in 1995 or 4, something like that. Goes back a ways. And I had a South Lane Wheels bus, and it was all full, and we were going to drive out Mosby Creek all the way around and do a full tour, which, by the way, we have brochures here, also designed by Alice Christensen, and you can find online a driving tour. But we have these brochures that are just fantastic that go around all the haunts of Opal around downtown Cottage Grove, and then out Mosby Creek and out Row River. But John Wilson here, my bus was totally full. He came up to the bus. He had under both arms, he had 3-ring notebooks, and he just kicked the door open. And somebody in the back of the bus recognized him, said, "That's John Wilson. He can have my seat." So John Wilson came on to the tour, and he took it over. I mean, I didn't get a word in edgewise. John Wilson but he took us all back in time out at the Row River Valley, because he was a wonderful historian who knew, though he was the last living person, one of the few last living historians who knew the real old timers. So it was just great. And then he took me under his wing, showed me how to be a community historian, showed me how to go into he introduced me to people who might not otherwise have let me come in and see their precious family photographs and heirlooms. But he did. He taught me how to do that and introduced me around Cottage Grove. So I'm very much indebted to him and to these people. I'm pretty loyal to the University of Oregon. This was the Center for Advanced Technology in Education, and they got a grant to put Opal Whiteley's diary online. This was 20-something years ago. And Dr. Lynn Anderson, the person right there, wanted to fill it with photographs of the real people and the real places that Opal's written about. And that's never been done before. So we put it on the web. That's me, believe it or not, right there. And it was after this that I started searching for my 7th grade teacher, Mrs. Bruce, who I didn't find until a couple of years ago. But a lot of who I am in history is due to a 7th grade teacher. I failed the 7th grade, got held back, tried to get kicked out of the school 26 miles away they sent me to, but that didn't work. And then I went to LSU. I graduated at the bottom of my high school class, but thanks to the great Governor Huey Long had a rule that any Louisiana high school graduate could go to LSU. Nowadays you have to have a B+ average or something, they make you have this average, but back in 1970, no, you didn't need that. Huey Long made a law because LSU, he felt, was keeping the rural kids out, saying that these rural kids couldn't keep up. And Huey Long, of course, his big area of popularity was among rural people. So he got this law passed. Any high school graduate can give LSU a try, and I did, and yeah, I flunked out 3 times, but I never dropped out, not once. I got kicked out. Yeah, I'm proud of that. I am proud of that. This 127th birthday of Opal, and Councilor Meriday and his wife Amy here have made this wonderful cake. So I think it's time for me to stop talking ancient history and start serving cake.